Welcome to The Business on Radio Verulam, the voice of your local business community.
Hello, it's Sunday, it's 8 p.m, and yes, welcome to The Business. I'm Trevor Merriden with the show that's essential listening for the West Hart's business community. In this show, positive attitude, customer understanding, emotional intelligence, and a host of other terms. We like the sound of them on this show, but what do they mean? Tonight, therefore, we're focusing on that elusive X-factor of business. What goes on between the ears of those working in UK PLC, and what impact does it have on results? A recent report shows that a smile to a customer can lead to a 40% increase in sales, so there's something to it, obviously. We'll be bringing you interviews with Hart of Retonic, a masterclass in emotional intelligence from Kerrie Fleming of the Ashridge School of Management. Friendly customer service par excellence from Angelo Padormo from Barrissimo. Then there's more insight into the subject from Alison Bainbridge from ABA Research. And what do customers think of a positive smile and a can-do attitude? Plus, of course, we've got light bulb moments and our diary, a roundup of the week ahead. But first of all, I've got my two sort of bright ray of lights in the studio here, Clare and Vicky. Are you okay this evening, ladies?
Oh, I like being described as a ray of light.
Yeah, lovely description.
This is a show all about sort of the mind and psychology and so on. So I'm very much looking forward to a bit of a special show. But first of all, what have you noticed in the news?
Well, this last couple of weeks, actually, I've been looking at sponsorship opportunities for a couple of clients, etc. And looking at associations, I couldn't help but notice, and don't laugh, but I couldn't help but notice David Beckham was stripping off again to promote underwear. But this time it was for H&M. Now, I think that last time I saw him in his underwear, it was Calvin Klein. And I think before that it might even have been Ralph Lauren. So what caught my eye, apart from the obvious, was how important
Be very careful where you're going with this, Vicky.
But how important it is to really attach your brand to another brand that has the same ethos, the same values, and most of all the same customers.
Yeah.
And stick with that. Don't sort of move around too much. Because what did strike me was that although I probably could remember, or possibly could remember what the brands were that David Beckham was promoting, what I could remember was David Beckham very definitely. And actually all that shouted out to me was that, you know, the association was bigger than the brand itself, and that should never be the case, because in sponsorships it's all about the association, it's about the partnership, and it's about satisfying the needs of all of the parties that are involved, and that's what really makes a very, very good successful sponsorship deal.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, also there's that Sky advert where he's kind of everywhere. There's like several hundred David Beckhams appearing. I just thought, well, that's just like the advertising in general, really. He's kind of all over the place. Maybe a bit too much. He's got too much time on his hands now. Maybe he's retired.
It's an interesting juxtaposition as well, given that, you know, he's gone sort of slightly more mass market with the brands that he's associating with. Meanwhile, Victoria, of course, is about as top end as you could get. So you've got a bit of a disparity with the concept of the Brecon brand as well, the Beckham's brand too. So interesting stuff. But if you're looking at sponsorship deals, you know, just slow down and take a look at all of the different aspects and make sure it's a real clever partnership.
Absolutely, Claire. What have you been spotting?
What I noticed, well, we've all had a really good summer. We've enjoyed the weather, and John Lewis released some figures last week, and they've done some comparisons between 15th of July last year and 15th of July this year. And they point out that there's been an increase in just about everything because the weather's been good. They're saying that each of its stores have sold a fan every 30 seconds.
Gosh.
An increase of 300,000 on the same time last year. Barbecue sales were up 281% on the same time last year, and picnic hampers were up 320%. So it was quite interesting to read all the products that had gone up, and it kind of conjures up this picture of a family outside. They've got the barbecue going, they've got the sun cream, which was another thing that increased in sales, and sunglasses. They've got their barbecues, their trampolines. So every single thing that had increased in terms of sales were all things that we could imagine all having out in the back garden. So yes, I suppose you come to the conclusion that the good weather, apart from making everybody feel good, also fills up the tills.
Absolutely. I just wonder, was there You said 15th of July last year to 15th of July this year?
Yeah, they did the week to the week ending the 15th of July this year, compared to last year.
I see. So I was thinking, would there be an Olympics thing, but they won't. That doesn't really.
No, I think
be affected
I think
by
the
that,
good weather.
So,
we had good weather nearly all of July, didn't we? So, yeah.
No, I think that's it's very. And also the thing is, even if it is just a sort of comparing this year with last year, the act of it making people feel good about things is of itself, I think, a good thing sometimes. To hear those things, and generally the figures just seem to be pointing in the right direction.
They certainly do. But it is interesting because I know we're going to hear about it later in the show, but. Good weather makes people happier, and they look better, and they're smiling, and it all sort of works together to make a perfect storm, as opposed to negative spiral downwards.
I think as well that the sort of thing that's getting sold does make you smile, because actually when you hear about barbecues, everything's quite sociable, and it makes you smile to hear those things. The more sunglasses, more. It
always sounds a lot nicer than umbrellas and Macs, doesn't it?
Exactly, or Wellingtons.
I think anybody who saw me doing a barbecue would certainly smile, and I don't think they'd enjoy the food very much, but that's nothing. I saw, and this is related to the show that we're doing tonight on sort of attitudes at work and positivity and so on. A subject, emotional intelligence. It's something that's coming up in the next few minutes anyway. And I was very struck by an article I read, which said that emotional intelligence is twice as important as IQ in predicting outstanding performance, and EQ, of course. Can be developed well until our 40s, so it's not something you're born with, it's something that you can actually develop, so whether we are born as a leader or not and so on. So we'll be hearing, as I said, a lot more from Kerrie Fleming of Ashridge in this show, a very good interview that is too. But the reality is that some people are kind of better developing the emotional intelligence than others, and the 4 tips that I saw in this article about developing emotional intelligence are things that you probably all should be doing anyway, but we all do to a greater or less extent. So I just ask folk to sort of bear this in mind, sort of ask for feedback, get to know your own strengths and weaknesses. Don't be afraid about that. Pay attention to your team, notice their mindset and emotional state, encourage open and honest communication, and take the time to acknowledge and thank team for their efforts. Now it doesn't sound like rocket science,
common sense,
but I suppose it's just a testimony to these things aren't done enough, really.
Certainly, absolutely, couldn't agree more. And they sound like 4 very simple, straightforward things that ought to be written in quite big, bold letters on the front of everybody's computer, or on the wall by the till, maybe.
Absolutely. Now, Vicky, you went and on the first bit of our show, our sort of special theme this evening, you went and talked to Katie Hart, didn't you? Recently,
very,
from
absolutely fascinating lady. Does an awful lot of research all over the place, all over the world, in fact. And she'd got some very, very clear examples and ideas about marketing to the men and women. And
that's right. So she's kind of at the appliance of science kind of end of the of spectrum. And she particularly focused, as you'll hear now, on things about how men and women think differently, and which is such an important part of sort of attitudes within the workplace. So we'll hear a bit from her now.
We've just seen some fantastic presentations, and I'm delighted to be talking to Katie Hart of Retonic. Now, Katie, do tell us about how your business works.
Thank you. Yes, my business is all about bringing the world of academic psychology into the business arena. So in psychology, we understand a huge amount about why people behave the way we do, why we are created the way we are, how that impacts us in terms of our day-to-day lives. And yet that information isn't used in a huge part of our lives, which is actually the working day.
I would think that lots of small businesses would be thinking, oh, well, psychology, that's all a bit too complicated for me to be using in my business. So it sounds really interesting, but how do we apply it to small businesses?
Very easily. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. It can be very complicated if people choose to see it that way. But the information we have is it's commonly known in some arenas. It's just about translating that and making it relevant to businesses. So the presentation I've done tonight is talking about gender and the fact that men and women are different. And I think that's a starting point that we all agree on and we all know. But it's just looking at how you can actually utilise the differences and understand those differences to make the most benefit for your business. So if I give you an example, we now understand that men and women's brains are different. So the male brain is very much focused on being competitive, having a sense of achievement, and being able to analyse, problem solve. They're all things that are very appealing to the male brain. Whereas the female brain is much more nurturing, it collaborates rather than competes, and it empathises. So it comes from a very strong point of view of emotion and feeling.
So how do you put that into the business workplace? I mean, a lot of blokes, let's say, I mean, to be really sort of sexist, would sort of say, oh, you do all the touchy-feely stuff and we'll do all the sort of hard numbers. You know, it's got to be more complicated than that, and it's got to be more useful information than
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, I approach it from a number of different ways. Firstly, there are ways that you can actually use it with your workforce. So you can use it to train your workforce better, to motivate your workforce better, and for sort of team building. If people understand why we see things differently, then it gives us a far greater insight and a far greater ability to work together for the benefit of the whole organisation. The second part is I use it in marketing. So it's actually how can you communicate to your customers or your consumers. And we now know that 83% of purchases are carried out by women. So if you are presenting information in a way which they find it either unappealing or difficult to relate to or to understand, you're going to switch those women off. And I think a classic example we always use is a car. You know, if females going out to buy a car, if they get sold it in terms of brake horsepower and torque,
what colour seats has it got, and are they leather?
Well, there we go. Exactly, that's much more likely to matter. And I think it's just working with businesses to understand that when they're looking at somebody or when they're conducting a sales with somebody or they're putting a pitch to somebody, just being able to tweak the content that they give so that it's much more relevant.
So are people like, for example, the car showrooms, are they getting the hang of this? Are they understanding this? Are they changing?
Some. Some are. Definitely not as many as we'd like, and definitely not as fast as we like.
Are there any industry sectors that are getting it better, getting it right?
I think one of the ones I identify as financial services seems to have got a grip on this now. It used to be very much a male domain in terms of savings, pensions, insurances, whereas now a lot of their marketing is much more targeted to be relevant to females. And I'm not saying that it needs to alienate the males. I'm not saying it should be presented in a way which no longer is relevant for men, because that's not the case. But it's about making sure both genders are comfortable with what information goes out, and that's where financial services seem to have the advantage at the moment.
Thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting, and I'm sure that this is a sort of a debate and a discussion that's going to really develop over the next few years. So thank you very much, Katie Hart from Retonic. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you, Katie?
Probably the best way is through my website, which is retonic.co.uk, or they can follow me on Twitter, which is @Retonic, which is RHETONIC.
Hi, this is Danny Smith. Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Hart's Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondence covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Hart's Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Well, just before the break there, we were listening to Katie, and she was rather good, wasn't she, Vicky?
Oh, she was fantastic. And what I failed to say was that she had been speaking at and presenting at the West Hart's Business Awards launch back at the beginning of the summer, when she came across not only clearly very knowledgeable, but very entertaining, very thought-provoking.
So we've looked at an expert in action, but let's go back to some definitions. Let's talk emotional intelligence. What does it mean, and how can you apply it in your everyday business life? To further explore the topic, Vicky spoke to Kerrie Fleming of Ashridge Management College.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are thinking, oh, it's that touchy-feely stuff. Now, I know that it's not touchy-feely, and you're looking at me with raised eyebrows. It's an awful lot more than that, isn't it? And the value that it can add to business is immense. Can you explain to the listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. You're absolutely right. I mean, we have a lot of participants who come through the doors here, and inevitably people I meet on a daily basis outside of Ashridge who often think emotional intelligence is very much about being emotional. And it's not that at all, actually. It's about being able to recognise what's going on in yourself at particular moments. So we talk about being aware. So awareness is very, very important. So we talk about intrapersonal awareness and interpersonal awareness, which means being aware of yourself and being aware of others. So one of the first parts of being emotionally intelligent is all around your ability to pick up emotions. So in yourself, so if you're in a meeting and you're finding yourself getting a bit stirred up by something that's going on, what do you do with that? So it's really important that you don't let that manifest into something bigger that will disrupt the outcome of the meeting, so to speak.
And being aware and being tuned in to the people around you, how can that really help business?
If you can understand how people are and how people are feeling, it's not about being inappropriate, walking up to people saying, "How are you feeling today?" But it's about being able to read the signs. So if you've got somebody who usually comes into the office in a reasonably good mood on a daily basis, and that mood is a little bit different, it's very possible that that will affect the outcome of the day. It will affect team interaction, it will affect client interaction, and actually will become quite a contagious maybe mood that will filter into other aspects of what's actually going on. And if it's left unaddressed for long periods of time, it can be very, very dangerous, because we often come across situations where clients would say to us, that there's one particular person in the office who, when they walk in the morning, changes the whole atmosphere. They change how things are done. They change the whole environment. People being able to speak easy. Innovation is something that's very much affected by emotional intelligence, and something my own research looked at.
I can imagine that this is very important in a sales arena, in a sales team, where there's always an awful lot of talk about the energy in the room, and somebody's successful and it spreads. Is that something that crops up a lot within sales teams?
I would say definitely so, and there has been some good research out there that would suggest that successful sales teams are usually high in emotional intelligence. It's almost like the skills are honed at a very early stage. So if a salesperson's calling into an organisation, I worked as a salesperson myself, you were picking up the mood of the company as soon as you sat at reception. You were picking up the vibe from the receptionist, what kind of a place is it to work? So salespeople are very much honed in and often can be really, really skilled at it. But unfortunately don't always listen as much as they should, if I could be so politically uncorrect.
I'm sure that's the case. For small businesses, I can understand how this can be really, really important and incredibly valuable when you've got big teams, when you've got management groups, when you've got the ability to really get under the skin of understanding this quite complicated area. For a small business person who might be even a sole trader, that's managing his business from home, how can they apply some of the sort of concepts that you're talking about to help them in their business?
It's, I suppose, one of the first things it's about, if you are a sole trader, or if you're even an entrepreneur that has set up a business, how passionate are you about what you're doing? So when you talk from the heart, when you're being sincere and authentic and really believe in your product or your service, that will be conveyed to your customers. So that's the first port of call. So the client will pick that up from you. They'll pick up your mood around what it is you are trying to sell them. Also, if you've got if you've got one or two people working for you or with you, it's very important that you're able to pick up how they're feeling, what's going on for them, whether they are being as productive as they possibly can, and if there are any emotive obstacles which are actually interrupting your business. So I'll give you an example. I recently spoke with somebody who's managing a particular person, and this guy has been performing quite badly throughout the year, so hasn't fulfilled any of the obligations around sending an email once a week updating his manager on the team, hasn't been updating some of the data on Excel and various kind of technical stuff that he was asked to do. So an appraisal ensued, and the manager got rather cross and said this was ridiculous and that, they were going to have to go to HR and start managing this guy out. And the actual guy himself got very defensive and quite aggressive. And when we sort of explored it afterwards with the manager and we did some coaching, it turned out that the guy who was being appraised was actually computer illiterate, which you could say, but that should have been an obvious thing. But sometimes as human beings, we disguise the truth. We don't tell people what's really going on, and this fear manifests itself as quite aggressive behaviour. So when you meet people who are being aggressive, or you meet people who are being difficult, an emotionally intelligent response is not to tackle that emotion straight on or that behaviour straight on. It's to go behind it and say, what's really going on with this guy? What's really happening here?
And it sounds as though in that particular instance, if those questions had been asked in the first instance, then actually it would have been a problem that could have been solved much more easily.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of these people issues take up a lot of management and time, even in small businesses, because you're not really ever you're so busy with the job and trying to keep afloat and keep the business going, keep the money coming in, keep clients happy, that we often just forsake how our employees are doing.
So it's something that can be really, not easily, because these things aren't easy, but every business, however big or small, can actually use some of these skills in terms of their communication with their staff, if they've got staff, communication with their customers, sort of any form of interaction. If they are more aware of the way that they're operating, if they're more aware and more familiar with the people that they're operating with, then it can really make a difference to the success of their business.
Absolutely, and it's about paying attention. I talked about awareness, so awareness of yourself and awareness of others. So if you are the guilty party who comes in the door in the morning, no matter how small your team is, with your eyes glued to your BlackBerry, looking down, eyes focused on the day ahead and missing a lot of very vital clues which are going on in the room with the people you have who are your main resource to keep the business going, then you're really foolish, because you're missing a lot of data there, you're missing a lot of valuable information that can be used. If you've got happy employees, you'll have a very productive team, because you don't have to be worrying about micromanaging them. They know that your door is open, they know they can talk to you, they know if they're having a bad day that they can put that out there and it's forgotten about, but that there is a space for them not just to be rational human beings. So it's really, really important.
So from a small business perspective, how can managers, how can business owners, how can entrepreneurs access some more of this information? How can they learn more about this? So there's some websites, there's some books. Not everybody can afford to come on a fantastic training course at Ashridge College, sadly, although we'd all love to, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a world of stuff out there at the moment. I mean, people always point towards the Daniel Goleman book, who's a very wealthy author around emotional intelligence. He's published 2 or 3 books. Personally, they're quite heavy duty. It can be quite heavy going unless you really want to take a deep dive into the subject. There are a lot of websites who talk about various EI skills. I know on the Ashridge website there was the 5 tips for being emotionally intelligent. So there, even on the virtual space, there's a lot of stuff going on that you could have a really quick and deep dive into EI. There's pocket books out there. There's EI for Dummies, I think.
EI for Dummies, that sounds good. I might have to go and get that.
So there's a lot out there, and it's a case of finding something that works for you, because a lot of these very dense academic books are not something that can be easily translated. And one of the big challenges for me here at Ashridge and throughout the rest of my professional life is to try and take something that is quite abstract in terms of a concept and really translate it into very practical things in the classroom, so that managers can feel like they can go back to work and handle a particular conflict situation they're having with somebody, or a difficult employee, a difficult team member, and what are the kind of small steps that they can do around simple things like asking a lot of open questions, standing back and really figuring out what's going on, reading the room, reading the mood, and doing something with that information.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's been quite a drive in this sort of investment in people sort of concept in the UK, and it's no surprise to me that those investors in people types of companies tend to also be successful companies. Right. So when you get your book out, when you've got your easy access to EI, then you must come back and tell us more about it.
I would be absolutely delighted to.
Thank you very, very much for your input. We hope it's been very valuable, useful information for all of us out there that are trying to run small businesses. Thank you very much, Kerrie.
I think we're all feeling a little more emotionally intelligent than we were at the start of that interview. Now that was good stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
It's difficult not to feel more intelligent after you spent time with. I have to say, Dr. Kerrie Fleming.
Yes.
We didn't really introduce her properly at the beginning, but it was a fabulous time that I spent with her. And to be honest, I could still be there because it's such an interesting subject and it's so valuable, and it's not understood terribly well, and it's certainly not rated as highly as it needs to be.
Right. So we've had the appliance of science. We've gone through some of the terminology. When we come back after these messages, we'll be looking at positive psychology in action.
The Solid Gold Music Show on Radio Verulam is with you on Saturday mornings between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Join Derek Staines and Stephen Hall as they flash you back, value discs, have a brief biog, and interview the stars. We also allow SJH to ramble down nostalgia lane. It's all on the Premier Oldies show here on 92.6 FM. The Solid Gold Music Show, sponsored by Dockguard of Luton.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Now, for some businesses, a positive attitude to customer service comes naturally, and this is the case at the Italian cafe on St Peter Street called Barrissimo in St Albans. For the owners, Angelo and Rosa Padormo, providing delicious food and coffee is only part of the equation. Customer service ranks just as highly. Now, Roma, our Roma intrepid reporter, started by asking Angelo how he came to running Barrissimo.
I've been a chef for many years, and then I went into management for corporate companies, doing catering for large events and mass feeding of workers in big establishments like BP Oil and GlaxoSmithKline. And I got to a stage in my life when I thought, well, it's really time I should do something for myself. I saved up some money and thought, let's go for it. And at the age of about 45, which was about now 12 years ago, we created Barrissimo. Now, Barrissimo initially started out as being a cafe making triangle sandwiches and coffee. But of course, soon enough we found out that triangle sandwiches, everybody was making triangle sandwiches in the marketplace, in the high street. So we decided to create our own style, and that's where it sort of arrived from, really. Our fantastic open sandwiches, which we create ourselves in-house. Things like pastas we create ourselves, but that's really basically because my experience in cooking and the passion for food, which goes back to my childhood when we came over from Sicily.
Just sitting in Barrissimo, I arrived a little bit early for this interview, thought I'd sit down and just enjoy the atmosphere, have a coffee. One thing that also struck me is how many people come in that must be regulars, because everyone seems to know you and Rosa very well.
We've created this cafe from really getting to know people. So from the word go, when we first started here, I thought, well, my background is cooking. My background is just really the back of house. And I thought when I put myself in front of these people who were coming in and operating the till, what happened was I thought, well, I've got to really sort of front this up. So I really wanted to learn about people and make people be our friends, and that's really where it all comes from. You ask somebody their name and they get to talking to you, and you enjoy their company, and they come in, and so it's really kind of feeding off them, and we treat everybody as our friends, really, and that's a secret.
It's interesting because, as you're probably aware, there have been a number of surveys over the years looking at what makes customers return, what makes good customer service. And one of the more recent surveys has talked about how if you smile and laugh, then you can potentially increase your sales by as much as 40%. Would you say that's true then?
Without a shadow of a doubt. On a day-to-day basis, we probably serve maybe 200-300 customers. And on a daily basis, you get to know these people, and you speak to them on the first name basis. It doesn't really matter what kind of walks of life they're from. They could be the council chief exec, or they could be a little old lady who's been retired for 30 years. It doesn't really matter.
So, given that the rest of the country seems to be talking about how awful the marketplace is, we've had a few years now of so-called recession, your cafe is so busy. It doesn't seem to me that, like the rest of St Albans, that there's particularly recessionary behaviour going on here.
I think that over the years we had certainly an increase in sales year on year, and since it took about 18 months before it really sort of filtered down to us, when people were saying, well, the recession, but we didn't really feel it at all. Although now there has been a flattening of the line, and it is not quite what it used to be. But I think still we're holding our own, and it's not so bad. I think people are prepared to sort of spend a little bit of money where they feel that it's good value for money. And maybe by coming to Barrissimo, it's not just a cup of coffee. You can get a cup of coffee anywhere. You can get a sandwich anywhere, but it's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit about the friendship and the companionship, and just coming in and having a bit of a laugh and a giggle with other customers, and there is a bit of just mingling of people within the cafe.
And how do you feel about people like, I've noticed we've got another Costa that's opened up, we've got Pret, and then apparently in the new hotel that's being built there'll be yet another Costa. Is that an issue for Barrissimo?
Well, inevitably it would be daft to think that it wouldn't have any effect at all. But I think that we actually offer a little bit different, a different offering. Our sandwiches are different to theirs. Our soup is different, and also what they don't get in Costa and in Pretz is the warmth of the cafe, which is very often not really thought about. When you walk into a place and you get warmth, and you can feel the people and you can feel the atmosphere, that's actually so important when you have a cup of coffee, or you're just there for relaxing, or whatever it is,
So if I want to come for friendly atmosphere, wholesome food, fabulous coffee, and a real sense of community, definitely should be coming to Barrissimo.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no other place in town. Best place north of Milan.
Well, there you have it. Clare, he was a nice bloke, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think as well, this just shows you that for some people this just comes naturally to them. They don't need reports, they don't need any figures, they actually know exactly what to do innately, and it's just the sort of person he is. He would do it anyway, I think, and I've certainly been in Barrissimo, and it's absolutely true what he said. There's a warm atmosphere, the food is great, the food's very fresh, it's absolutely delicious. But yeah, he's an embodiment of what we've been hearing earlier in the show. I
mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that I go in there regularly, and I'm always struck by the friendliness of the staff. It's not a false friendliness, no. It's a very genuine, warm, come into the family kind of thing. And do you know what? I don't notice what I'm handing over in money, and I'm not saying that they could charge me anything, but it's actually you sort of your resistance to you don't look at the price so much in those situations. So I mean that actually it kind of buys you some credibility, I suppose, as well.
It's interesting as well because if you remember back to the retail awards, I remember reading some research when we were doing the backup for the show, and actually the ability to have a decent cup of coffee and a good sandwich came second only to the stores when for the shopping experience. So it's really, really good news for St Albans that we've got some such fabulous coffee shops around. That, I mean, that's not to knock the chains, but there's a good few. There's Barrissimo, there's Cafe Roma, there's some other lovely sort of independently owned coffee shops that really make a difference.
Right, and we'll be talking a bit more about this whole subject just after the break. We're going to have Alison Bainbridge, and we'll talk a bit more about her in a second.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weston.
And I'm Lydia L. Curry.
Join us every Thursday evening on The Parent Show for expert interviews, local information about caring for children in West Harts,
and a What's On guide you just can't afford to miss. We're here every Thursday between 8 and 9 p.m. on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Don't forget to tune in!
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
Or indeed, send us a message on Twitter at RV the Business. That's another one that we don't mention on the trailer, I think. So, but let's crack on with this themed issue. And Alison was our next guest along the lines, wasn't she, Clare?
Yep. So we've actually got somebody. She's based in St Albans. The group is called ABA Research, and they do research into retail. And the lady that Vicky spoke to is called Alison Bainbridge.
We often overlook the most obvious things in life and try to overcomplicate, find really difficult solutions when an easy answer is often the best answer. So a lot of truth in it, even though it is very simple.
And what do you think is the most important element of it? I mean, which is the simplest bit? Just smile more, or really should people be spending a lot more on staff training?
Well, staff training is part of it, because I think it's the enabler that if you train people, you invest in people, they feel better, more engaged, more confident. And then the smile comes naturally at the end of that, because they're no longer terrified walking up to a member of, a customer who's going to ask them potentially a difficult question.
Now, I can understand that in a technical shop, but I mean, if you're selling, sort of T-shirts or your jewellery or cheese, does it have to be that complicated?
I think we can underestimate how intimidating it can be to be asked quite simple questions in a retail situation, because you imagine some of the people working there are quite young, so there could be quite a big age gap between them and the person who they're talking to, and then they can just feel silly not to know the answer to quite simple things like, where can I find the milk, or what times do you open, or can I shop online? And so they feel they should know these answers. And if they don't, then that can start to feel intimidating, and so they put their head down and don't look confident. And even if they are a naturally friendly person, maybe they don't come across as that friendly in that situation.
That's quite interesting that you mention age there, because some of the retailers have started actually employing older people. Do you think that an older person has some of those skills more naturally than a younger person?
I think maybe they have those life skills that a younger person doesn't have. Maybe they feel confident in admitting their holes in their knowledge that a younger person doesn't feel so confident in doing. Maybe younger people are so used to taking exams and having to have the right answer that they suddenly don't feel it's okay to say, you know what, I'll go and find someone who does know the answer. So they almost feel like they've been a bit more judged as well.
Well, that's interesting. So in the recruitment process, if we take out the age gap, etc., do you think that it would be wise for people employers to be putting a caveat, which is, we want a smiley face on the till?
Yeah, or not, it isn't just a smiley face, but someone who naturally wants to deal with other people and doesn't find it a bother to deal with other people. And I think you do get people who are naturally more engaged at a personal level, and those people who are a bit more reserved, a bit more thinkers, who perhaps are not going to find a retail environment or any service environment as good for them.
In an interview situation, how easy is it to determine whether somebody is a natural communicator, a natural, naturally confident with people? Because in a one-on-one situation, it's obviously very, very different to being in a busy shop with 3 people in a queue behind you.
I think that is true, that it's quite hard to test, but I think good recruitment can cut through that. And of course, under pressure, most people revert to type. So put a bit of pressure on in an interview, and I think you probably will see a natural kind of disposition shine through.
Now, we know that there has been difficult times. Retail's been hit particularly hard. One of the things that comes out very firmly in this is that the combination of online and actual bricks and mortar is really the way to go. Once again, it seems like an obvious route forward because you can't tell people how to shop, so therefore you need to potentially provide them alternatives. But how do you make them work together?
I think online and high street retail shops do 2 different things for customers. So the high street shops are all about interaction and people and exploring. And increasingly, I think online is about doing the business, making the purchase. And so I think we're increasingly seeing shops about showrooming, about looking for advice and help, and then people switch online having done some of that work in store. So I think they work increasingly well together, and customers are increasingly knowing how to put the 2 together to get the best for them.
So when you say they're working independently, so you really have to understand the difference in terms of the offering in store versus the offering online, and not just try to replicate.
No, I think absolutely don't try to replicate. Get them doing different things, and then that becomes kind of the sum of the parts. You get even more out of it as a customer, and you as a business can get even more out of it as well. But if they just try and do the same job as one another, it leads to confusion, and they're not naturally kind of well disposed to do the same thing. Because computers and online are really good for searching and for information and quite rational decision making, and a store is much more kind of a place to explore and intuitively feel your way.
Well, there's sort of emotional aspects of it, and does it sort of feel right in my hands type of feeling.
But of course that makes people and service all the more important for the future in a retail environment.
Now, one of the other things that the survey brought out was that the time of day seems to have quite a dramatic effect. Now, I know from my own experience in marketing that if you wanting to do telesales, for example, it's best to hit people early afternoon because they don't want to have to do the work themselves, so someone else is doing the work for them. Then that's a good time. In a shop environment, quite often, at the busiest times, they seem to have the least staff.
Yes.
It happens in banks and post offices and things like that. Oh, it's lunchtime. We'll just have the 1 till open. Once again, surely it should be possible to manage that within a store staffing timetable.
Yeah, and I think stores obviously work really hard to do that. It's not just the volume of staff in the store. Things start to go wrong at that time of day. So at the beginning of the day, you're fully replenished and everything's going to plan, and then you get to lunchtime and stocks are going a bit lower and customers move up in terms of the numbers, and so things just start to fall apart at that time of day. And in fact, a lot of stores don't ever recover from that. It's kind of catch up all day long, and kind of the service can go just increasingly down from that point.
Oh, so don't shop in the afternoon.
Go early.
There's some very interesting information here, and there's some really easy tips, I think, for the smaller retailers. If there was one thing that you could recommend that a sort of one-off shop did, what would it be?
Be personal. Just really invest in people, service, know your customers, talk to your customers, dare to ask them how you could improve, what's not going quite so well. And really listen hard to what they're saying and respond to that.
That was absolutely fascinating. 7 minutes and 50 seconds of gold, I think, in terms of advice from Alison. Alison, thank you very much for that contribution. What struck you about it, Claire?
Yeah, one thing she said was so true, which is when you go shopping and you're in a shop, quite often you come out of that shop with something you didn't really mean to buy. I think that happens quite a lot, whereas she was saying that on the internet you're very, very rational because you don't see the thing in front of you, you don't touch it, the assistant doesn't tell you about it. The whole experience of shopping is quite an emotional experience. I think this is why this kind of research is very important.
I could go on for ages about whether this is an emotional experience or not, shopping. But Vicky, what did you think?
Well, it was a great treat as always to talk to Alison. She did a great job for us at the Retail Awards earlier in the summer, and Alison runs ABA Research. She's the MD of it, so she really knows her stuff. And as she said right at the very beginning, it's not rocket science, but it's invaluable, and sometimes we really overlook the simple elements to retail and to service. And we're not historically very good at it in this country. So if you do get it right, like Mr. Barrissimo, you can really make a huge difference to your bottom line. And this is the bit that people forget, that this is about return on investment, you know, that you can really, really make it work and reap the rewards.
Make a difference in terms of consumers, and of course at the end of the day it doesn't count for anything unless the people who buy your stuff are impressed. And when we come back after the next break, we'll be hearing from some of them.
Join Simon Carver on Fridays from 6:30 p.m. for the Film Guide. We look at the UK cinema box office top 10, a selection of the new cinema releases and the best of the week's films on free-to-air TV. That's Fridays from 6:30 p.m. on West Hart's Drive Time with Danny Smith, exclusively on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Hi, this is Daryl. Can I invite you to join me for something different on your radio this coming Saturday? As well as the Andy Hour, we've got City Cultures, Community Life, Retro Radio, Everything 80s, Nothing But 90s, and so much more. Join me this coming Saturday between 1 and 4 on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Right, welcome back to The Business. As we said, we've heard all about the scientific approach, terms like emotional intelligence, all this stuff in practice from Angelo at Barrissimo, and also Alison just talking there, with innate common sense about the whole thing. But ultimately, all of this is utterly meaningless unless the consumers really appreciate things. So, are we talking hot air about nothing, or do consumers actually really value the difference? And Vicky, you've been out sort of talking to folk about this.
Out on the streets as always. I'm going to get picked up one day. Yes, no, it was very interesting. I just happened to be wandering along the street and thought I'll go and pick on some likely shoppers.
So you whipped out your tape recorder.
We'll hear about it in a minute. What dawned on me though after I'd asked a few people was that I for some reason picked on a lot of men. And their shopping experience, as we've heard from Katie earlier, is different from women. However, let's have a listen. So when you go into a shop, do you think that it makes any difference if the shop assistant is super helpful, overly attentive, smiles, that sort of thing? How do you react when people serve you?
If someone's happy when they serve you, it makes you happy. But when you get like a moody person that serves you, it does put it down on your day sort of thing.
So do you think that if they're happy and you're happy, you're likely to spend more money?
I don't know, it depends what you've got in your purse, really. Yeah, I don't know.
So it depends what you've got in your purse, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you've got to the till and they react positively, then
it is better. Yeah, a lot better.
A lot better, would you say?
Yeah.
Because there's been some research recently that said that it can make up to sort of 20% difference to a retailer.
Oh really? VHS and things like that.
Yeah,
they're kind in there, like nice in there. But if I went into Primark, they're not.
They're not.
No,
okay.
You can just tell.
So it just makes a difference to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments. Right. So what do you think makes a difference when you go into a shop in terms of service?
I think good service and people paying you attention and staff there being knowledgeable, because a lot aren't these days.
knowledgeable, that's interesting, because there's a lot of people that do research online before they shop, but you still think it's important, actually, that the assistants have knowledge too.
If you want some information about a particular product, or indeed if they're out of stock, when they might have it in stock, or when you can get it, usually you don't know. So,
that's really. What about their general sort of demeanour? If they're happy or they're smiling, or how does that affect your shopping?
Probably makes a difference if they're smiling and they're engaging with you and they're being positive. More likely to stay in the shop and see the transaction through.
And go back.
And go back. You'd go back too.
Yeah.
You think it makes a lot of difference to repeat purchase?
I've had to complain about certain shops.
Oh, really?
Yes. Which is it like one of the comments? I went in and they were all too busy texting and having a chat to actually serve customers.
So what about good experience in retail outlets?
Somewhere like Waitrose.
Waitrose always seems to come up, or John Lewis seems to come up.
Yeah, because they actually, if you say, do you have this product, they'll actually physically take you to the product on the shelf.
Yeah. So this research that suggests that service really makes a difference, it rings home for you?
Definitely, yes.
So when you go into a shop, if someone smiles, do you spend more?
Yes, I think I do. I spend longer in the shop, which probably means you're going to spend more ultimately. And also, I think you're more likely to go back and spend more. Because smiling raises the energy of the person smiling, it raises the energy of the person receiving the smile. And it just raises the energy of the whole situation.
Have you had any particularly good experiences? We're not renowned in the UK for fabulous service, are we? But there seems to be some certain pockets where it's particularly good.
Yes, I think... I was in John Lewis the other day and somebody smiled at me and I thought that was very, very nice. For example. Yeah, I think,
it wasn't an attractive lady by any chance, was it?
Well, it might have been, which always helps.
Well, some of
and if she's an attractive lady, she should smile at everybody.
It's interesting, some of the younger clothes stores, they seem to have a policy of employing very attractive people, and it certainly seems to work very well.
Oh, I think it does. It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
If they got it, just adds to the attractiveness of the shop.
Mm. And, during difficult times, one of the things that quite often gets cut is training budgets. So training in terms of staff and service quality and staff engagement can get cut in difficult times. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the same as a lot of sectors. I think that's a totally false economy. That's the time they should be doing more training. If they're not that busy, well, spend the time on doing some training, even if it's only in-house. Get the smiliest person in the shop, for example, to train everybody else to smile.
Sounds like a good idea. Thank you very much for your comments.
Okay.
So, does a smiley face and a have a nice day work for you in the shop?
I'm not sure have a nice day does, but a smiley face definitely, yeah. I think if you've got, if people behind the counter or people helping you out on the shop floor are personable and pleasant, and smiling and happy with what they're doing, it puts you in the mood to buy. I think it's a really good idea. It's something I would have my staff doing if I was running a retail outlet.
And do you think it can affect things by as much as 20%, which is what the data is showing?
If that's what the data says, it doesn't surprise me at all. I would have thought so, yeah, why not?
And you've certainly felt you would spend more?
I would spend more, definitely, yeah.
So he wasn't in much doubt there. He said he'd definitely spend more. I mean, interesting, those attitudes, don't you think?
Nothing was surprising when I was out on the streets, to be honest. That sounded funny.
That just came out so wrong.
No, seriously, it seems to be such an obvious thing that if you treat people properly, then they'll respond properly. And in the retail environment, responding properly means buying more stuff. So that didn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me that the names that we hear over and over again came up. So I think when we see the retail results, we see these names again and again. They're doing better, their numbers are doing better. It's because their customer service is very, very good. So all retailers out there, whether you're a small coffee shop or you're a huge, great, big international operation, get some good customer service going and you'll see your customers flocking to you. They'll be coming back for more and they'll be spending lots more as they do so.
Wondering what you could do this weekend? Well, you don't have to go far from home. There's plenty to discover on your doorstep. Join me, Ellie O'Fira, this Friday at midday when we'll be giving you some great ways to get out and about close to home. That's Out and About, Friday at midday, here on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
You're listening to The Business. We're coming towards the end of our show. I think if we look back at the sort of things we've maybe learnt over the last hour, I mean, for me, I'm just sort of absolutely flabbergasted that actually how deep the roots that the sort of psychological approach, positive psychology approach is starting to take now. Science is generally accepted. That it's being practiced in pockets around the place, and in some industries like retail, for example, it's a clearly a part of the thing. Even in the sort of the outposts, the outer Mongolias of customer service, we're starting to see a thaw, and that people realise that smiles equal profits, to make it sort of rather superficial, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that a lot of these companies have had to alter really the way that they treat their customers to be more similar to how retailers treat customers, because retailers already know that customers are very important and they know to treat them well.
Absolutely. It is not about price anymore, because everybody's done that trip. It's now you've got to make a difference, and one of the ways you can make a difference is through that customer relationship. And if you get that right, then you can laugh all the way to the bank.
And it must be quite difficult for a lot of these professional companies that haven't had to do that. So probably the likes of your insurance companies, maybe your lawyers, all of these types of companies are having to if you like, get touchy-feely and smiley and all these kind of things, because at the end of the day, it sells. Whatever it is you're selling, it sells more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very heartening for a positive show with positive people like us sort of on it to hear that these things are actually spreading really well. Well, that's it. I hope you've really enjoyed this issue of the business, all about sort of positive psychology and what goes on between the ears of UK PLC in terms of actually driving a performance. What an important part of business performance it actually is. Thank you ever so much. Thank you to Vicky. Thank you to Clare, and the three of us and Roma will be with you for our next issue. So good night for now.
You've been listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.